In the fall of 1997, a college senior says goodbye to her mother and heads out for the evening, planning to spend a little time with friends cruising around her small hometown. But when her curfew comes and goes without a call, her family immediately knows something is wrong. After a sleepless night spent searching and calling friends, her mother and stepfather contact police. Then, Erica's car is found, but Erica is nowhere to be seen. In a town of just 650 people where everyone knows everyone, suspicion quickly begins to creep into everyday places. The neighbor you pass at the grocery store, the man standing next to you at the gas pump, even friends. A detective known for solving every homicide he took on from the beginning becomes deeply invested in Erica's case. He spends the remainder of his career trying to find answers. At the center of all of it is Erica's mother, who refuses to stop searching for her daughter. Over the years, hundreds of people have been interviewed and several were polygraphed. The case has taken unexpected turns, including one man close to Erica who openly named himself as the prime suspect. Nearly 3 decades later, Erica Fraysure is still missing. Her disappearance forever changed her friends, her family, and the small town she called home. This year marks 29 years since Erica vanished, and the town that never forgot her is still waiting for the closure and healing it deserves. I'm your host, Megan, and each week on A Simpler Time True Crime, I cover older unsolved cases and challenge the idea that a simpler time meant a safer time. This week, I'm bringing to you the unsolved disappearance of Erica Fraysure. Just a very quick content warning at the top of this episode. This episode does discuss suicide later on, and I'll give a heads up when we hit that part. As a disclaimer, I want to acknowledge that this case includes discussion of individuals who were investigated or suspected over the years. Being investigated does not equal guilt, and anyone mentioned in this episode is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Lastly, I want to thank listener Sarah for requesting this case and trusting me with it. She has close personal ties, and though she was young when all of this happened, it has profoundly affected her, and she's made it her mission to share Erica's story and seek justice whenever possible. So Sarah, I hope I do right by Erica's story, and we can get some new eyes and ears on it. More importantly, the right ones. And with that, let's get into it. Brooksville, Kentucky. When I say tiny town, I mean it. There are just 650 residents then and now. And most of the towns nearby are the same size or even smaller. In fact, Brooksville is actually the county seat, so by local standards, it's considered one of the bigger towns in the area. It is home to Bracken County High School, where students from all the surrounding communities come together. One of those students was 17-year-old Erica Fraysure. Erica lived with her mother and stepfather in nearby Germantown, a town of roughly 150 people. Her father, Kevin Fraysure, lived in Augusta, which was considered a bigger town with around 1,100 residents. Much of the area is made up of rolling farmland. In Brooksville itself, you will find a T intersection where Main Street, which turns into Miami Street, meets Frankfurt Street. From those roads branch off a few small village streets with houses and a handful of local businesses, all sharing the same space. And then, almost as quickly as you arrived, you are back out into miles of open farmland. It is a beautiful area, but you also have to know what you're signing up for when you choose to live there. The closest major cities are Cincinnati, Ohio, about 40 miles to the northwest, and Lexington, Kentucky, about 70 miles to the south. Most families who live here have been in the area for generations. People value the insulated, neighborly feel of a small town where everyone knows everyone. But it's not exactly bustling with things to do. So when Erica was a senior in high school, a common activity for local teens was something called driving the main drag. They would cruise through town to see who else was out and around that night. Sometimes it meant piling into a car together and just driving around with no real destination. And that's exactly what Erica planned to do on the evening of Tuesday, October 21st, 1997. Erica had a regular day. She went to school, came home, did her chores, made a jar of iced tea, and ate dinner with her family. At around 7 p.m., she told her mom she was heading to hang out with friends and said she'd be back around 10. This was the established curfew, though some sources indicate she had a bit of a grace period until 10:30. And she was good about communicating with her mom. She and her mother Maggie were incredibly close. Maggie was just Erica's age when she had her, and so in a way they somewhat grew up with one another. But Maggie was no pushover, and Erica had a lot of responsibilities. She had more than a lot of her friends, actually. She worked at a local pizza shop, she had her own car, she was saving money, and she planned to go to college the following year. It was down to a college in Georgia or staying closer to home and going to Northern Kentucky University, where she wanted to major in accounting. And she was leaning towards staying closer to home. So she kissed her mom on the forehead like she always did, told her she loved her, and went out. We know that Erica did depart her Germantown home and then drive the 6 miles north to Brooksville. She met up with friends, and there were certain sightings of her. Now, accounts say she went to a game room in town, and others say she went to a place called Video and Tan. And I'm not sure if those are one and the same. I wouldn't think so because Video and Tan was exactly what it sounded like. You could go grab a movie to rent and then hop in a tanning bed for a few minutes in the back. Those two things may not sound like they go together, but tanning beds and video rentals were a big part of the 90s, and in small towns like this, it wasn't uncommon to bundle businesses together. It still is. And that's because you otherwise wouldn't have enough customers to sustain one type of business. So by expanding and bundling, your business has a greater chance of making it. Places like a laundromat and car wash combo, a hardware store and feed store, a pharmacy and gift shop. You get the idea. It was all about making the most of a single storefront. So anyway, I don't consider that a game room is the same as Video and Tan, but maybe Video and Tan had games too. Different townspeople had different sightings of Erica that night. And overall, here's what we know of the timeline. 7 p.m. she departs home. 8 p.m. she is seen at or in front of that game room. And again, we don't know if that's also Video and Tan or something separate. And at 9 p.m., she is seen at a local gas station. At around this time, she is seen with a passenger in her vehicle. At 9:30, a witness saw Erica drive by the courthouse, which is pretty central in town, and they say she was by herself in her vehicle. Erica's cousin, a man named Billy, stopped in at the residence of Erica and her mother and stepfather, the Dougherty residence, at about 9:20, and he told Maggie and her husband that he had just seen Erica at the gas station and that she should be home on time for curfew. So just to help organize that a bit for you, 9 p.m. at the gas station, her cousin stops by the home at about 9:20, telling Maggie, oh yeah, I saw her, she should be home soon. 9:30, a witness sees her driving by the courthouse by herself, and that is the last confirmed sighting of Erica. 10 p.m. comes, 10:30 comes, no sign of Erica. And as I mentioned, this isn't like her. So her mom begins calling her friends. Now, over the years, public information on this has gotten a little spotty, her friendship circle, because while a few people are mentioned by name throughout the course of the investigation, many friends have never been mentioned. So those of us who live outside of the community do not fully know who Erica encountered that night. In addition, Erica was going through some changes at this time, and it came out that she was kind of hanging with a rougher crowd. And in that may have become a bit disconnected from her previous friendship circle. I just want to pause here for a moment and point something out. In the true crime space, we sometimes lose sight of the duality of people. Humans are complicated. Most of us aren't all one thing or another. But when someone becomes the center of a case, the way they're described often swings to extremes. On one end, you'll hear that they lit up every room, never did anything wrong, and were basically angels on earth. On the other hand, you might hear that their life was spiraling, that they surrounded themselves with dangerous people, and that they were just living some sort of high risk lifestyle. The reality for most people is somewhere in the middle. Erica may have fallen in with a tougher crowd, and she may have tested the boundaries a little. We don't know the full extent of whether she experimented with substances or not. That possibility exists, and it's fair to acknowledge it. But that's only part of the picture. Because Erica had just asked for more hours at work. She had plans for the future. She was close with her family. She was enjoying her last year of school and on the honor roll. And the people who knew her described her as someone who would do absolutely anything for the people she loved. People are rarely just one thing, and Erica was no exception. The reason why I'm bringing this up, especially in reference to this early side of the timeline, is because Maggie may have been calling people that she typically hung out with, and they may have not been a part of her plans that night. In fact, one such person was Erica's best friend, Amanda. She would later tell Dateline that when Maggie called her, she knew Erica had begun hanging out with new people, and honestly, she wasn't immediately alarmed. She figured she just went off, got herself into a bit of trouble, possibly even drinking or something like that, and she'd be fine and would be back. Amanda would later tell Dateline that her and Erica argued on that day of her disappearance, just a high school fight amongst friends who had been friends since early childhood. But that hauntingly, it would be the last conversation she ever got to have with her best friend, and that just makes my heart break for her. When Maggie and her husband Danny hit a wall and morning came without Erica's return, they called the police. Maggie's friend Amanda would later recall that an announcement came across the speaker at Bracken County High School asking for students to make contact and come to the principal's office if they had any idea of the whereabouts of their classmate, Erica Fraysure. I can't imagine how unsettling that must have been to set the tone for that day, and how hard it must have been for people to try to focus on anything other than where their friend was. And maybe that's why so many friends decided to go out that afternoon and evening to search. They drove all around, looking around the vast farmland. And on that Wednesday evening, October 22nd, as the search was closing in on the 24-hour mark, something was spotted. Remember that T intersection I was talking about? Well, if you continue down Main Street out of the village and drive just outside of the outskirts of that main part of town, on your right will be a street called Franks Lane. That's spelled Fronks for all my people who like to Google map things, and I have some on the Instagram as well. This is the opposite direction of Germantown and not the route Erica would have taken to drive back to her mother's home. As teens drove down that road, they spotted Erica's black 1988 four-door Pontiac Bonneville. It was in a farm field between two large bales of hay. Bracken County Sheriff Mike Nelson responded to the scene, and by 9 p.m. he had called Kentucky State Police Detective Bob Scott on his home phone. Detective Scott had already had the missing case on his radar. In an area like this, policing can look a little different than it does in major cities, and so Sheriff Mike Nelson and KSP Detective Bob Scott joined forces often. On this evening, Mike Nelson had news for Scott. Erica Fraysure's car had been found, but Erica was not with it, nor were her keys. The car had been driven about 30 feet off the road. There were no signs of any struggle in or around the vehicle, but the car was unlocked and inside was Erica's purse. It contained the things you would expect, like her money, checkbook, and driver's license. News reports indicate that there were plenty of other houses in the area, but when I do the overhead Google map, which I'll share again on Instagram, I'm not seeing what they mean, but they add that the car wasn't obscured even being between the hay bales, and that it was in plain view for people driving by. And that makes sense to me, especially with it only being 30 feet off the road. Finding Erica's car gave the case a bit of direction, but it also opened the door to a lot more questions. Because people don't just leave their cars behind with all their personal belongings still inside. And once that reality set in, the hope that Erica had simply gotten caught up with friends and stayed out a little later than she should have, maybe in a small moment of teenage rebellion, that started to slip away. A flatbed truck loaded up the car and brought it to the state lab in Lexington, where it would be forensically investigated for fingerprints, hair, and fibers. Sensing the urgency of the situation, her family banded together and put out a $5,000 reward almost immediately. They hoped that those who were on the fence about talking would be swayed by this financial incentive. They talked to the press and shared that when Erica left the house that night, the 5'6", 115-pound girl with light brown hair and blue eyes was wearing a purple sweater with 2 white stripes, blue jeans, white Keds, and a Winnie the Pooh watch. Erica had been obsessed with Winnie the Pooh since childhood. And just of note, Erica had no steady boyfriend, and she also had no history of running away or signs of depression. The ground search intensified with the finding of the car. Detective Scott was joined by the Owen County K-9 Unit, the KSP, local law enforcement, the volunteer firefighters, family, and friends. They all searched the woods surrounding the field on the 53-acre farm. Neighboring farmers who owned the adjacent property searched their land, their barns and outbuildings, but they also came up empty. Cadaver dogs were taken all over the rural land throughout the county. Over 50 volunteers participated in the initial searches. Her mother, Maggie, was frequently seen comforting fellow searchers, telling them not to give up hope. Probably speaking out into the universe the truth she so deeply needed to hold on to for herself. Maggie was strong but crumbling inside. She didn't sleep at all for the first 2 nights and was searching nonstop. And when she finally rested, it was awful for her. She told the Lexington Herald Leader, quote, "You just can't imagine what it's like trying to go to sleep knowing your child's out there and you can't find her," end quote. Friday the 24th came and Erica did not pick up her paycheck from the pizza shop, and she didn't touch any of the money in her bank account. By Saturday the 25th, the search was halted. That didn't mean they were giving up. In fact, Detective Scott told the press, quote, "We'll search for Erica until we find her." But they had to shift their focus more onto those who were last seen with Erica to find the next direction, and also continue to get her face out there to surrounding communities. So they called in the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or NCMEC, and they contacted America's Most Wanted. Meanwhile, Erica's classmates were frightened. According to Erica's mother, Maggie, 6 of Erica's girlfriends from high school received anonymous threatening phone calls. The person on the other line sounded like a male caller trying to disguise their voice. With each call, the caller would ask if the girl knew Erica and then would say something along the lines of, "You're next." Many of the girls would then hear laughter in the background, and police thought that the calls were just a cruel prank. Heavy on the cruel because I can't even imagine joking about something like this. Still, they looked into them. It's unclear if the girls only received one call each or if the calls were repeated, but as quickly as the calls started, they stopped, and they all occurred around the 29th. Even the classmates not getting the calls were frightened by the situation. Despite the search being called off officially, classmates continued to pull together groups of about 40 to continue their own search. The senior class put out formal pleas to the community via the newspaper, asking for prayer vigils as well as searches. They also asked homeowners to search cisterns, wells, old junk cars they may have on their property. And meanwhile, the KSP and county deputies were doing the exact same thing. Classmate Wade House told the Lexington Herald Leader, quote, "When you live in a small town where everybody knows everybody and something like this happens, it's kind of hard to deal with it. It's not just school people that get scared, it's everybody," end quote. Another classmate, a girl named Kristen, who was a year behind Erica in school, said, quote, "My grandma's afraid to see me walk outside. She's terrified," end quote. I know it's cliche, but this really was a town that didn't lock their doors or take many precautions. And from everything I've read, this whole situation caused the townspeople to reassess and almost overcorrect. But I should say it's not overcorrecting to lock your doors. And if you're a longtime listener of mine, you know this is a soapbox topic for me. So go check your locks right now. And if they aren't locked, fix that and then hit play again. Speaking of Erica's classmates, Detective Scott spent a lot of time inside the walls of Bracken County High School. At the time, there were just 379 students in the whole school, and he worked his way through interview after interview. He actually interviewed every single junior and senior girl. He was trying to understand the social circles, the friendships, and the dynamics that made up both the school and the broader community. The Bracken County High School that stands today is actually a different building. The current high school was still being built when all of this was unfolding. And the more time Detective Scott spent there, the more he learned, though much of what he discovered he kept close to the vest. But in a small town like this, confidentiality in police work can only go so far. Rumors were already beginning to swirl. On November 1st, Erica's case was featured on America's Most Wanted, and the community was trying to show up in ways that they could. One local landscaping place offered $1,000 worth of yard landscaping for homeowners who brought forth information on Erica's case, or $250 cash for non-homeowners. Community churches placed Erica and her family in their prayer request bulletins. Prayer vigils were held, white ribbons were placed on trees, and the $5,000 reward was bumped up to $7,000. But although the community was generous, Maggie encountered people trying to take advantage of the reward money too. One psychic wanted to get $1,000 for information they would provide. Another man said he knew information, but he wanted a car purchase to get the information. Maggie replied that she may be desperate, but she's not stupid, and if he truly had the info, he could turn it over for the $7,000 reward and go get a car with it. Days turned into weeks. Detective Scott flew another helicopter over the land to see if he could see anything new. Additional investigators were brought in for review to see if they saw anything that was missed, but they weren't able to identify anything. As the 1-month mark approached, Erica's mother Maggie said she still felt she was out there, but she was growing discouraged. She told the Lexington Herald-Leader, quote, "The days get longer and the nights get tougher, but I believe with all my heart that we'll find her alive. She has nothing to run from. She was one of the more privileged kids. She had her own car, money in the bank. She didn't take anything, not even her makeup." She added her suspicion on who she thought was responsible, saying, quote, "I even think it might be somebody I know, somebody she knew, maybe not so much on a friendly basis. This is a small town. There's not many strangers that come through here. I know Erica's a fighter. She won't give up. I kind of think whoever took her just might be scared, not knowing what to do, panicking." End quote. As fate would have it, someone Erica knew would soon put themselves in the headlines when they interviewed with the media and named themselves as the prime suspect. You'll recall that this part of Kentucky is near the Ohio border, with Cincinnati being the closest city. And so this next update came out of WCPO-TV News there. This person I'm about to discuss did both a print interview and on-camera interview. There are actually a couple he does over a few weeks. The archived interviews are on YouTube, and if you scroll to my source material, I have them linked and labeled for you. So this person is 21-year-old Shane Simcox, and he was one of the friends in the aforementioned rough crowd that Erica was hanging out with. And Shane made a couple of bold statements in those interviews. He stated that he was the last person to see Erica that he knew of, and he named himself as the prime suspect. According to Shane, he had been out bar hopping with friends when Erica pulled up to a street corner in Brooksville and offered him a ride, as Shane did not have his own car. He said he took her up on this and they drove around for about 15 minutes before getting kind of bored. He said she was in a good mood and told him a bit about a boy she had a crush on. Shane was living at his step-grandparents' house at this time, and he said that Erica dropped him off there around 9 p.m. and then drove off to head home herself. The press contacted KSP detective Bob Scott and asked him for his comments on this, to which he said, "I have no idea why he made that comment." When asked if Shane Simcox was the prime suspect, Detective Scott simply replied, "Shane Simcox chose that label." Shane Simcox openly told the media that he had refused a polygraph test, not because he had anything to hide, but because he was unhappy with how police had treated him in the past. Detective Scott said that Shane Simcox was the only person so far who had refused to take a polygraph test. 8 others had been administered the tests, but Detective Scott would not release the results of the polygraphs. He also confirmed that Shane Simcox was the last person known to be seen with Erica in her car. He was also not amongst the group of friends who found the car in the field. Refusing a polygraph is one of those lose-lose situations because any attorney is going to tell you not to take one, but the moment you don't take one, you do look suspicious. But Shane does a lot of things that don't do him any favors, and including the criminal history he has. But to back it up to the beginning, Shane Simcox had a troubled life. His mother died in a car accident when he was a baby, and he never knew his father. His grandmother and step-grandfather raised him. He then occasionally lived with friends. He was expelled from high school his freshman year due to threatening to kill one of his teachers and her child. Shane admitted to this in an interview, but he downplayed it, saying he didn't mean it and he was just joking. In 1995, he was arrested for burglarizing the Brooksville fuel stop, and he pleaded guilty in December of 95, and he served 3 months in jail. He was actually originally sentenced to 3 years in prison, but he had something called shock probation. Shock probation is when someone serves a short period of time in prison before a judge releases them early and places them on probation. The idea here is that the initial time behind bars provides a shock that encourages the person to change their behavior. In this case, after that brief time in prison, Shane Simcox was released and then given 5 years probation. And speaking of that 5-year probation, law enforcement offered to negotiate shortening or waiving his probation time if he was willing to take a lie detector test, but he still refused. Shane worked at a local hog farm, and he can be seen walking around the grounds of the farm as he was being interviewed. He said his friends were pressuring him to take the test to clear his name so that they could just move forward, but he wasn't sure he wanted to, that maybe he'd consider it in the future. But I can tell you as of 2026, he is not. Something else just of note, another article from the same exact time indicates that Shane's story was that Erica picked him up at his house. They had cruised around town and that she dropped him back home later. A few scenarios could be at play here. One, old newspapers would sometimes mix up details and it's possible it's just a reporting error. Two, it's possible that Erica did initially pick Shane up, drop him off to bar hop, cruise around with some other friends, and then circle back to pick him back up. And 3, that Shane is telling multiple stories. As much as I'm suspicious of Shane, I lean towards 1 or 2 being more likely, but that's just my personal opinion I'm inserting here. The day after these stories broke, detectives checked another specific cistern and a septic tank was pumped. Detective Scott said that these were just additional places they hadn't searched yet and that it was completely unrelated to Shane's interview. The next major break in the case would come about a week later on November 28th when the missing keys to Erica Fraysure's Pontiac Bonneville were found. And they were found about 75 yards away from where her car originally was, in the same field amongst some trees. Apparently, an anonymous volunteer took a metal detector out into the field, and that's how they were able to locate the keys. So, smart thinking on that person's part. Detective Scott said they couldn't have been thrown from the road, that he had tested it several times himself and only made it about halfway. And so those keys were sent off for forensic testing. Erica's mother said that this finding reinforced that Erica would never just toss her keys into that field or even walk into that field voluntarily. As the holidays rolled in, the grief for Erica's family and friends grew heavier. Judy Wells, Erica's aunt, said she couldn't bring herself to bring out her Christmas tree that year. Maggie said there would be no Christmas celebration that year for her family, but she did keep the large stuffed Winnie the Pooh plush animal that she got for Erica sitting out on the couch just in case there was some kind of Christmas miracle. By Christmas, local banks had joined in on the reward fund, and it was up to $25,000. the courthouse displayed a bright Christmas tree, which the town referred to as the Tree of Hope. It was layered with white ribbons and a laminated photo of Erica. The school had a similar tree, a giant Norway spruce. Classmates held another prayer candlelight vigil. In January of 1998, NCMEC selected Erica as the person to be featured on the Advo Company flyers, with flyer mailers sent out to 73 million households in 48 states, with 1 million households covered in Kentucky. Maggie was appreciative of this, saying, quote, "Every day is tough because there are so many things that remind me of Erica. I just know she is out there somewhere. I'm also thankful that the community has stood behind me every step of the way," end quote. In early March of 98, Shane Simcox was arrested again. According to reporting in the Bracken County News, Shane Simcox was indicted by a Bracken County grand jury on 3 counts of second-degree possession of a forged instrument and 1 count of being a second-degree persistent felony offender. Possession of a forged instrument in the second degree means someone knowingly had a fake or altered document and intended to use it as if it were legitimate. That could include something like a counterfeit check, a forged ID, or another falsified financial document. In this case, there was also a charge of being a persistent second-degree offender. That isn't a separate crime itself, but rather a designation used when someone has a prior felony conviction. It allows the court to pursue more serious penalties because the person has been convicted of felonies before. According to court records, Simcox had 3 checks containing forged signatures. The checks, written on the First National Bank in Brooksville, had the signature of Robert Joseph Jacob. In addition to the forgery charges, he also violated his probation by failing to pay certain fees and testing positive for marijuana. Just fast forwarding ahead briefly to close the loop on this and keep it easy to follow, he pleaded guilty to these charges and with the sentencing enhancement received a 15-year sentence. In March of 1998, the Lexington Herald-Leader ran a piece specifically on Detective Scott's dedication to the case. He shared that this case was personal to him. He knew most of the people in this tiny community, and he knew Erica Fraysure. So did his daughter, who was just a year behind Erica in school. He shared that from the get-go, 2 things stood out to him that led him to believe that Erica did not leave on her own. One was her close relationship with her mother, and the other was the fact that she didn't pick up her paycheck or touch her finances again. He said that one weekend, he spent a whole night parked in that field waiting for cars to drive by. When he saw one, he pulled the car over and he immediately recognized the person who was driving as a local he was familiar with. He asked, "Did you happen to be driving by here at this time last week?" And the person said, "No, I wasn't," and he carried on. Detective Scott said that he's built a lot of rapport in the community, and because people know him, they don't mind being stopped by him, and they're more apt to share things with him. He did these stakeouts a few times, but it didn't produce anything successful. Trooper Scott was in his late 40s, and he was a 25-year vet at this point, and he had a perfect record for solving any homicide that he investigated from the beginning. In this interview, he gave some thoughts. He talked about all the people who had helped out in the investigation up to this point, including people from outside agencies who worked on their days off to help. That and all the pathways they had taken, even going to old junkyards and searching the rusted out vehicles. 300 plus interviews and even talking to psychics. He said the forensic analysis of the vehicle was fruitless and shared that Erica was pretty much the taxi driver for her friend, so there were so many fingerprints in that car, it just wasn't really effective. It was clear that Detective Scott felt a great deal of responsibility to see this case till the end. In May of 1998, Erica missed her senior prom, but a table with her photo was put out to remember her. In early June, her class of 1998 graduated without her. Maggie attended and was moved at how much they included her. Her cap and gown was draped over an empty chair, and many of Erica's classmates gave graduation cards to Maggie. In the fall of 1998, as the investigation dragged into its 11th month, Maggie flew out to New York City to try something unconventional. She attended as a guest of the Montel Williams show, and he hosted Sylvia Browne for that episode. If you happen to be unfamiliar, psychic Sylvia Browne was a well-known figure in the late 1990s and early 2000s, frequently appearing on the Montel Williams show, where she claimed to use her abilities to help locate missing people and provide answers to grieving families. Over the years, she became one of the show's most recognizable guests, appearing dozens of times. But Browne was also highly controversial. Critics pointed out that many of her predictions about missing persons cases later proved to be incorrect, and skeptics argued that her statements could give families false hope or, in some cases, cause additional pain. Despite that criticism, her appearances kept her firmly in the public eye during that era of daytime television. On this episode, Maggie sought any information on the disappearance of Erica, and this gave way to one of the more controversial parts of this case. It is still controversial to this day. I'm going to present all sides on this and be sensitive to the emotional punch it packs to people tied closely to those involved. This is also the segment in which I'll be discussing suicide. So early in the month of September, the show is filmed, and on September 24th, 1998, the show airs. In it, a video segment providing background information on Erica's case aired. Then, Sylvia and Maggie exchange dialogue on some questions and answers. Sylvia says that the man who murdered Erica is currently in prison for a different crime, and that someday he will confess to the murder. She did not name names, but obviously we know of one person who fits that description. Maggie then asked if there was anybody else who helped or knew details of the crime, and Sylvia answered yes. And when Maggie followed up and asked for a name, Sylvia said a name that the show redacted by bleeping it when the show actually aired. But those who watched the show said it was clear that Sylvia said the name Chris. The very next day after the show aired, on the early evening of September 25th, 1998, a 28-year-old man named Chris Menier shot his fiancée, a 24-year-old 8th grade science teacher named Carmen Moorhead. He then turned the gun on himself. Chris died instantly, and Carmen would die before arriving to the hospital. The community began to piece what they thought was the puzzle together. After tuning in and decoding the name Chris, this Chris was someone who at least adjacently ran in either Erica's circle or Shane's circle or both. The thought was that possibly he had also watched the show and that he had been involved in Erica's murder or had helped cover it up, and that perhaps Carmen had information about it, and when he felt like things were closing in, he took his own life and that of Carmen's. Police dispute this both then and now. They did confirm that Chris was questioned in Erica's case, but they said that was a lot of men and boys in town and that they had eliminated him well before this due to him having a strong alibi. What that alibi was, they've never said, just that they're confident in it. Now, Chris and Carmen actually had a lot going on at this time because they were part of a larger group that had recently been brought up on charges with 3 other women and 2 other men on an assault charge of a man named Bradley Johnson. According to court records and reporting in the Falmouth Outlook, the people involved were charged with assault in the first degree for, quote, unintentionally causing serious physical injury to Brad Johnson by holding him and beating him with hands and fists and kicking him with shoes, boots, and feet, all or one of which was a dangerous instrument or acted in complicity thereto against the peace and dignity of the Commonwealth of Kentucky. For Carmen Moorhead's role, she had gotten in trouble for being connected to this incident, and she faced charges of falsely reporting an incident by giving false statements to police officers and facilitating assault first degree. Obviously, when all was said and done, this was very secondary to the overall tragedy, and it kind of put this all in the rear view, but they were set to go to court in about a month. So was this about Erica Fraysure or this incident or both or more things we're unaware of? According to the Kentucky State Police, they state this incident is not at all connected to Erica's murder and is purely a domestic incident. I want to emphasize that this is the official police stance while also conveying to you that there are locals that have deep ties to this case, including relatives of Carmen Moorhead's, and they believe it was not a coincidence and that Chris had at least some knowledge. Wherever the truth lies, Chris and Carmen are no longer here to tell us, so the only way of ever finding out is if someone with equal knowledge or involvement in this case as the killer comes forward and tells the truth. No matter what, it's just a really, really sad situation and more tragedy to an already hurting town. Related, Christopher's mom sued Montel Williams, their production companies, Sylvia Browne, and others in a lawsuit. But in short, the court dismissed the lawsuit because privacy and defamation claims cannot be brought on behalf of a deceased person, and the mother could not sue for emotional distress over statements made about her son. One other piece of information that came out of the Sylvia Browne episode was that Sylvia stated that Erica had been strangled and then dumped into a Bracken County lake. In response, KSP detective Bob Scott identified the lake, which was on private property, and he said his team would be dragging it within the week. And so the 5-acre, 24-foot deep lake was dragged on September 30th, 1998. There were no signs of Erica or anything else. When KSP tried to reach Sylvia Browne for further guidance and clarification, she conveniently couldn't be reached. October of 1998 brought the 1-year anniversary of Erica's disappearance, and with it, the loss of hope that Erica would be coming home for Maggie. She told the Cincinnati Enquirer, quote, "It's just been too long. I didn't want to face the fact that she was dead, but you can only deny it for so long. I've got to accept it sometime. She's not coming home," end quote. Maggie said that Erica should have been a freshman accounting major at that point. She had rearranged some of the house at this point and decorated for Halloween, Erica's second favorite holiday behind Christmas. She also had a room of clowns and knickknacks because Erica loved clowns and, of course, Winnie the Pooh decor. Maggie expressed frustration that she didn't have answers and that not enough was done to help find Erica and identify her killer. In a moment where some detectives may get defensive or mention all the work they've put in, Detective Scott simply told the papers in response, quote, "The bottom line is, her daughter has been missing for a year. My job is to find her. I haven't done that. I can't even imagine what she is going through," end quote. After this, time passed on, and while Erica's case was still in the forefront of the town, reporting on it began to drop off. Yearly vigils continued, the prayer requests stayed in the bulletin, but not much else was mentioned until KSP detectives gave an update in 2007 on the 10-year anniversary of the case. The update was that, frankly, there wasn't too much of an update. Instead, they decided to use this opportunity to put what they said were some long-standing town rumors to bed. The first was everything involving the murder-suicide, which we already discussed. They re-emphasized that this had no connection to Erica's case and that Mike was cleared prior to his death. The next was that Erica had run off and started a new life. They said that people who run off do not leave their ID and money behind, and that's something you need to start a new life, and that she would have made contact by now. Another rumor that had surfaced was that Erica had attended a large party that night nearby where her body was found. There are different variations, but a common one was that she had possibly overdosed and that partygoers panicked, disposed of her body, and moved her car. Investigators stated that they interviewed many people and that with certainty they know that the party in question took place the following night, the 22nd, when she had already gone missing and her car had already been found abandoned in the field. Also, remember that new high school that was being built? There had once been a rumor that her body had been disposed of there below a stairwell and then covered in cement. Detectives stated that they took the lead seriously, even as they themselves found it far fetched, and they used ground penetrating radar and other tools to determine that Erica was not, in fact, at that location or others that had been included in the rumor, including some parking lots. Detectives assured the public that the hog farm that Shane Simcox worked at was investigated, and several serial killers and suspected serial killers, including Christopher B. Lowe, had been ruled out. And they shared that ultimately they believed that Erica was dead, that she was murdered, and that she was buried or her body was placed in a heavily concealed location. KSP also shared that the FBI had developed a profile of the killer and shared, quote, "There is a profile by the FBI of a person of interest, a sociopath who may have had a history of animal abuse, strained family ties, and they may have been in jail at one time or another. They tend to keep to themselves so much they have very few friends and nobody they would confide in. They would be capable of killing someone and disposing of the body without ever feeling the need to share the information with anyone. They wouldn't brag about it." End quote. They also added that they believe the person was from the community, familiar with the area, and may still maintain a local address while moving around a lot. In 2008, an unnamed man in prison said he had information on Erica's case, including who may have killed her, but he said he would only share it if police corruption he said that he experienced in his case was investigated. It doesn't seem like much came of that, at least nothing released to the public. In the years after that, Erica's mother would develop cancer, and Maggie would die before ever reaching her 50th birthday. In 2016, her father, Kevin Fraysure, would die as well. Through the years, though, there have been multiple people who have picked up the torch to keep the flame of Erica's case burning. Relatives, friends, even a former English teacher named Caroline Miller, who has kept in touch with the kids who graduated around the year of Erica. I've linked an interview with her where she discusses the lack of counseling and resources those kids got in real time and how it's impacted them, going as far as saying that some kids it's even ruined their lives and impacted the way they live and parent and navigate. She stated that many of the people who sought out counseling help and had time to process the event over the years, they were starting to remember things, and she was there to hear them out and encourage them to share what they may know. The last thing I want to touch on that I haven't mentioned in any of the sequential storytelling of Erica's case is her possible connection to other cases. It's long been talked about that maybe she was tied to a bunch of other tri-state area cases of young women who had gone missing or been murdered during that time. But the more each of those cases were looked into, the less likely it looked that there was some serial killer doing all of these cases, and it's rather just a bunch of individual circumstances. I'll briefly touch on two cases that have some similarities. The first is that of 18-year-old Regina Cox, who went missing in late August of 1997, just before Erica, and in Somerset, Kentucky, which is about 2.5 hours between the two locations, so not super close. Erica Cox was last seen leaving the United States Armed Services Recruiting Station in Somerset, Kentucky on August 23, 1997 at around 11:30 a.m. She has never been seen or heard from again. The following morning, her mother found Cox's locked vehicle abandoned in the parking lot of a Walmart across the street from the recruiting station. Her purse, ID, and money were all still inside, but Cox was gone and her car keys were missing. Cox, who was born in Hamilton County, Ohio, had recently joined the U.S. Navy and was scheduled to report to the Great Lakes Recruit Training Center in Illinois on September 9, 1997. Her family believes she was taken against her will, and her disappearance remains unsolved to this day. Erica and Regina were both young. Their cars were found abandoned with their keys initially missing, and both had similar looks to them. They were petite and they had straight brown hair. But those are really the main overlaps that I can objectively note. The second is the case of Lainey Gwinner. She again has a similar appearance. She was petite, young, pretty, straight brown hair. She was presumed abducted while walking to her car outside of a bowling alley in Fairfield, Kentucky, which was over 2 hours away. In her case, her body was found nearby in a river, and she had been the victim of a homicide. However, her car has still never been found. Without solving these 3 cases, which they all remain unsolved, we can't say for certain that these cases are or are not connected. But I personally don't feel the circumstances, particularly given the geographic distance, seem all that convincing. And maybe that's because one of the most common things I see discussed in Erica's case is that the killer is right there from their local community. Erica's case has haunted the region for coming up on 3 decades, and there are so many questions. Shane Simcox has never been officially named a suspect, merely a person of interest who hasn't cooperated. He has moved around a lot since getting out of prison. At times, authorities don't even know where he is. But one thing I'll say is that the last known sighting of Erica was driving past the courthouse at 9:30 p.m. alone. Had she dropped Shane off and then encountered somebody else, either by happenstance or planning to meet up? Or did whoever see her just miss seeing a passenger in her seat or mix up their timelines? Was she alone at the gas station, or was Shane with her at that point? Shane, if you're listening to this and want the opportunity to speak your truth and clear your name, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at simplertimecrimepod@gmail.com. If you're innocent, that's a long time to carry that rumor, and I want the truth to free you of that burden. If you or someone in the community who has remembered information over the years, no matter how small, I strongly encourage you to turn it over to law enforcement. And if you know something and you're nervous about talking to police for any reason, reach out to me and I can help you navigate that in a way you're comfortable doing so. It's something I've done before and I'm happy to do it again. Let's make this be the year that a tiny town can heal. If you have any information on the disappearance and suspected murder of Erica Fraysure, please contact the Kentucky State Police Post 6 at 859-428-1212. This has been another episode of A Simpler Time True Crime. I research, write, record, edit, release, promote the whole thing as a one-woman show. So if you appreciate the work I'm doing and wish to support me monetarily, I have the Spreaker Supporters Club. You can find it at the bottom of the show notes, and joining gets you ad-free episodes when you listen on Spreaker.com or in the app. I also have a bonus episode in there now, and at the time of this recording, I plan to do more soon and ongoing. Free ways to support me include talking about the show on social media, leaving a 5-star review, and telling a friend. Case suggestions can be made to simplertimecrimepod@gmail.com. As always, thank you so much for listening, and join me again next Monday.